With us, Ms. Clark, will you call roll, please?
Representative Blackshear.
Present.
Representative Witt.
Here.
Representative Rafferty.
Here.
Representative Insler. Representative Ross. Representative Lomax.
Here.
Representative Tillman.
Here.
Representative Paramore.
Here.
Representative Sorrell. Representative Underwood.
I'm here.
Representative Standridge.
Here.
Representative Shaw.
Here.
Representative Green. Here. Representative McClammy. You have a quorum.
All right, thank you very much. Before we get started, we have a very special birthday today. Representative Shaw, happy birthday. We're not going to sing. Margie's not in here. We did not request her presence, but happy birthday. It is. It is. We'll get you something in the crypto world for a birthday present. We'll discuss that later today. All right, today's calendar, we have HB 297 by Representative Fidler, and we're going to ask her to come on up to the podium. This is a public hearing. I've got the list in front of me. We're going to give people 3 minutes each to speak. Right now we have 2 in support, 2 that oppose the bill. We'll let Representative Fidler have some opening statements. We will not be taking a vote on this piece of legislation today, but we're going to see if we have any questions once we get done. From committee members, if you hold your questions till the end, let's hear from Representative Fidler along with the individuals that want to speak for and against the legislation, and then we can ask our questions from there if that's okay. All right, Representative Fidler, welcome. Floor is yours.
Thank you, and thank you for hearing this piece of legislation. This came out of a group that studied some immigrant issues that we were seeing statewide over this last year. There were about 10 different things that we kind of looked at and that really needed some tweaking. One of these ideas was a wire transfer fee, and this whole idea came out of that trip that some of our colleagues went to the border, and they kind of came back and said, this is what we should be doing. Some of the issues were that we were seeing burdens, community burdens in our communities that were caused by this influx, whether it be non-English language speaking students in our schools, or issues with our law enforcement, where they weren't having enough money to be able to house some of the immigrants that they had to leave with, or if it was our hospitals having uncompensated care costs in our rural hospitals or hospitals in general. So that was kind of the first interest in this. As we moved along, we really tapered it down to, who this affects and who it doesn't affect. And this is what you're going to see on your piece of paper there in front of you. So I want to make sure it's clear that who this does not affect. And it's anyone that's using a payment processor like PayPal or Venmo, who facilitates transactions for goods and services. It does not affect any transaction originating from a banking institution like a bank or a credit union, or payment processors facilitating funds that originate from a bank or credit card or debit card. It does not affect anyone using a bank or credit card union wire or sale of money orders or check cashing or credit and debit card transactions. But who it does affect are individuals who send cash wired through companies that generally offer in-person services, including cash transfers like Western Union or MoneyGram, or individuals who send cash transfers where a licensed, legitimate bank is not involved. What does this bill do? It takes 4% on that wire transfer, and it puts 2.5% back into the community in which the burden occurs from the with the migrant influx. 1.5% goes back to help the sheriffs statewide. If you are a Alabama tax-paying citizen, you'll have a credit on be able to receive a tax credit, keeping up with your receipts. How will we ensure that future funds will continue to be used to reduce this community burden? This bill has a sunset. It sets up a legislative study group so that we can look at this, tweak it if necessary, and repeal it if it's not necessary in 3 years. The expected revenue, and you guys are in the money business. So imagine no less than 10 million would be the revenue coming in from this. So you can kind of think about how this can affect your community. The top 10 counties that are going to be mostly affected would be Jefferson, Madison, Mobile, Montgomery, Tuscaloosa, Shelby, Baldwin, Lee, Marshall, and DeKalb. And with that, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you very much. All right, so we'll start the public hearing portion now, and then we'll get our bill sponsor back up at the end. First off, we're going to start with a supporter, and from the Sheriff's Association, Mr. Hoss Max here, if he would. Well,
of this particular piece of legislation. I first want to thank Representative Fidler for the countless hours that she and several others have put into this. I don't know that personally, even though I'm a little bit new to my new role, I have been working on legislation over the past. This bill is important. As you know, there are many pieces of legislation before you in the House and in the Senate regarding immigration issues. And we're trying to solve a problem that's somewhat unique to Alabama. I found it interesting that not only did Representative Fidler talk about the top 10 counties that would be affected, there's a reason for that. It's called Interstate 10, Interstate 20, Interstate 75, Interstate 59, I-10, as I said. That's because a lot of drug flow and a lot of illegal immigrant flow comes through our state, through these, and they're classified as drug corridors. One of the things we know and that we've learned as we've started to address not only the immigration issue recently, but from years working drug enforcement, is that we know a lot of drugs flow into this country. But how do those drugs get into this country? They get here by money. Money flows back. Money flows back to these other countries that fund these illegal transitions and these illegal drugs that are coming into our country. And the sheriffs are the ones that are on the front lines. A lot of times in dealing with immigration, it falls to the authority of the county sheriff. And the reason for that is we're the whole county and we operate the county jail. So a lot of these individuals that are being picked up that may be proposed illegals, aliens, violators of our immigration laws are coming to the county jails. And then we're working with such entities as Homeland Security, ICE, and those to determine if in fact they are illegal, and if they are, to go through the appropriate process. Everybody knows that the current administration has stepped up a great deal to address this illegal immigration issue. However, it's still a local issue. Local law enforcement works every day to assist our federal partners in doing that, and it expedites the process. We know from investigative fact that a lot of these cash transfers that are going out of the country are going to drug cartels, and they're going to ferret out illegal alien activity crossing the border. I had 39 years in law enforcement. And as you know, I'm from Baldwin County, so I had I-10 and I-65 through my county. And I can't tell you the hundreds upon hundreds of cases that were worked in my county that spoke to what I've just spoke to you. Illegal drug activity, cash going back and forth across the border. And it's a big business. I can remember several years ago in Loxley, Alabama, a municipal police officer stopped a vehicle on I-10.
All right, wrap it in 15 more seconds.
And in that car was $13 million. $13 million. So this is an important bill. It gives us another tool in our toolkit, and I pray that you give it a favorable report.
All right, thank you very much. All right, now an opponent, Ms. Kathy Tomaski, I think I got that right.
It is a mouthful, I will say that. Thank you, everyone, for having me speak today. Chair Blackshear, Vice Chair Witt, and members of the committee. My name is Kathy Tomaszewski, and the Executive Director of the Money Service Business Association. We are the largest trade association representing money service businesses. We provide essential services to people in businesses in Alabama. They include bill payments, remittances, prepaid cards, money orders. I'm here today to urge you to oppose House Bill 297 due to the unintended outcomes it will produce for Alabama small businesses and law enforcement efforts. MSBs are highly regulated companies. We have strong anti-money laundering programs and work very closely with federal, state, and local law enforcement. The requirements imposed on the industry at the federal level by FinCEN are extremely robust and virtually identical to the same requirements imposed on banks. We are continually monitoring our transactions that are processed to look for trends and anomalies. Ultimately, a tax on these transactions risks the movement of money to underground channels or out of state in order to avoid the tax. That will reduce the monitoring of financial crime and also small business revenue. Most importantly, this hurts Alabama small business and Alabamians. The tax would impose costly burdens on all businesses, from large big box stores and grocery chains to small neighborhood community stores where these transactions occur. Some of these burdens include requiring technology updates to their systems, additional expense in signage, training employees to collect the right information, compliance procedures, as well as quarterly reconciliation efforts to submit and report the tax. Small businesses rely on foot traffic when money transmission activity is done. People will go to adjoining states to avoid paying the tax and then reduce the purchase of other products. The added expense to handle and the potential loss in revenue will cause the businesses that are still doing business here to raise prices, and consumers will have to feel the effects. Tax credits are allowed up to $5,000 to be received on the tax paid. However, this means that hardworking families will have to keep receipts and wait until the end of the year to get their own money back. Ultimately, the tax will also reduce the revenue that you anticipate to get from the bill. Several neighboring states and other states considered tax legislation this year that was similar, but they have backed down from the legislation as they came to the conclusion that it is harmful to their businesses, community, and constituents. The other reason that is key is that, okay, I'll just wrap up then. As mentioned earlier, we have strict regulation, and we actively monitor transactions and work with federal law enforcement. HB 297 increases costs of businesses, consumers, and regulators while reducing transparency and weakening law enforcement's ability to track illicit activity. I respectfully urge you to vote no on HB 297. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, now, supporter of HB 297, Randy Hillman with the sheriffs. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be brief. For those, I've worked with a bunch of people in this room over the last 25 years. This is my 25th regular legislative session, and I don't know how many special sessions in between. Worked on thousands of pieces of legislation. I was a prosecutor for 32 years, trying mostly death penalty cases. I put 13 people on death row, started several initiatives, one of which was the National Computer Forensics Institute with the U.S. Secret Service in Hoover, where we've trained 30,000 law enforcement prosecutors and trial judges in digital evidence, part of which this is a part of that, okay? Why are we standing here? I listened to the speaker ahead of you, or ahead of me, and say that things were highly regulated in this industry. I'll show you a picture. For those of you who haven't seen it, this took place, we took this photograph on February the 12th, a couple of weeks ago, at a store about a mile from here. And there are 3 or 4 more stores just like it that are doing this very same thing. What's in this photograph? These are old school telephones, green, red, yellow, orange. And what you do, this is tailored, this is classic money laundering, okay? What they do, you walk into the store, You pick up the phone and you say, my name is Randy, and I want to move $100 from here to there. Then you walk, and the person on the other end of the phone says, well, hang on, let me give you this code. And they give you the code, and then you hand the phone to the clerk. And then you pay the clerk that $100. And then the $100 disappears, and it purportedly goes to wherever you want it to go. We don't know where it goes. And who is the middleman in between? I'll let you make up your own mind about that. This is organized crime at its finest. And the question is, oh, well, these are hardworking people and they're working for cash. Yes, absolutely. But they are getting mistreated in the process. Just because we need to address this issue. Yes, the sheriffs will benefit from it. Yes, they will. You guys are considering a bunch of pieces of legislation this time where the requirements for the sheriffs have gone up. Correspondingly, the dollars for sheriffs, and I don't want to go open any wounds, those dollars have gone down significantly. If you want us to do this, you've got to help us, and we're asking you for that help. Is this bill perfect? No. We have taken care of all of the people that we know to take care of. Banks, financial institutions are exempted from this legislation. What you're after is what I described for you earlier.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
All right, our last to speak today is in opposition of HB 297, Patrick McWhorter. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. And I wanted to sign kind of in the middle. I'm not opposed to Ms. Fidler's bill. I understand what you're trying to get to. I'm here on behalf of Walmart Stores Incorporated and the Alabama Grocers Association. One thing that always strikes me is there's, as all of you know around the table, there's very few bills that don't touch a grocery store. I mean, it seems like, you know, we've had a lot of unintended consequences maybe this year that have affected things. Walmart contacted me about this legislation from the standpoint that they say that a large amount of their, well, let me back up. Number that struck me several years ago is that 25% of Walmart stores' customers have no banking relationship. That's why they have to cash payroll checks, because people don't have a bank. So what happens is a large number of these dollars that they provide the service for wire transfers go to military personnel overseas. Well, I found out since I talked to Ms. Fidler that by and large, our military personnel don't file tax returns when they're on assignment overseas. So therefore, there's no way for them to recoup the credit of that. So you take a family here of an enlisted person who's making mid-20,000s probably a year, and you charge them 4% or whatever it is, there's no way for them to get it back. So I would ask you to figure out, Ms. Fidler said they had talked about this issue but didn't come up with a way to resolve it, but I would urge you to consider that, because we certainly, while we want to get after the problems, and I support my sheriffs, don't misunderstand me, but while we want to get at that problem, let's not create a whole nother problem and a hardship for our men and women in the military services. Thank you.
All right, I'll declare the public hearing closed this time. Representative Fidler, if you want to come back to the podium, and I'll open it up now from questions from any of our committee members. I have a few, but I'll hold mine towards the end. Does anybody have any questions for the bill sponsor? Representative Lomax.
Representative, thank you for communicating about this issue. I think I completely get the problem that you're trying to get at. I did have a couple of questions and maybe some comments. So the gentleman that had mentioned the phones that we were just discussing that are in these, convenience stores or whatever when you pick up the phone, he mentioned that we don't know where the money's going and we don't know how to track it all. So, my question is, if something's illicit, and like in this case, like, are we actually able to attack a fee to something that
Okay. Most of those are licensed, so they would be regulated by the Securities Commission. And I actually have someone here. Someone here is from the Securities Commission that can answer some of those technical questions. The other that I heard one of the speakers talk about was, if this goes unregulated, could it go to other types of criminal activity, which is the same question I asked the Securities Commission the other day. And if you would allow, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Bo Brown can maybe perhaps answer some of those questions.
That's good. Do you want to finish your question and come back, or you want to go and answer that now, Representative Lomax?
Okay.
But if you want to, I guess you can get a closer seat, and we'll call you up. Maybe we can remember your list. I'm sure there'll be more than one question, and we'll let you address those at the end.
And then the second part, we had discussed this a little bit, but if essentially if this operates as a deterrent, which it potentially could, both legally and illegally, for purposes, is there any thought to guardrails around, well, where does that go? Because they're still going to find ways to send the money back. So like for instance in Venezuela, where there is no remittance, they cannot send wire transfers to Venezuela. They're going to cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin, and they're going to crypto ATMs. So was there any thought put into how do we just prevent it just going to different places essentially?
And that was the other question, because you and I had talked, so I did reach out to them. There are other ways now, and he'll go into that you can, I think Tether was one that he mentioned that you actually can do now, today, but there's such a fee on those sorts of things that folks usually don't do that. But there are, there is going to be ways that people find out to go around the system eventually, I would say. And I would ask Bo to come up and kind of address a little bit more of that, if that's okay.
Any more questions, Representative Lomax? You good? All right. Hold that. We're going to get you up here. I'm sure there's probably going to be more. All right. Any other questions for the bill sponsor? Representative Tillman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Fidler, I know you stated the different mechanisms of the bill would not affect, such as PayPal and Venmo. So what about Cash App, Apple Pay, things of that nature?
PayPal, none of those would be affected. So whenever we talked about, and we did have a conversation, I did have a conversation with Mr. Patrick a couple weeks ago, but your military families usually have PayPal, Venmo, a bank, a credit card, a debit card. They're usually not bringing a pile of cash up to the window and sending $1,500, and counting it out, so that they would not be affected.
Okay, so what about, I know you stated earlier that the information and the data that you receive from going to the border, is that correct, that you have? So can the committee see some of that data, some of that information that you received?
From I did not personally go to the border.
Okay.
But we had some of our colleagues that did, and those were some of the comments that they heard whenever they went to the border. A couple of those people served on that study group that I was on, and that they talked about, this is what we heard. And so when we started looking into it, we realized that that was a real issue. Now, we're not the first state to look at this, and this language, a lot of this language did come from the state of Oklahoma. And that state has had this language in, it's tried, it's true. So we kind of made sure we kind of stuck to this language. And talking about the hours that we put into this, I have to have a shout out to the Securities Commission, who made sure that the definitions were accurate and that they would be workable, and the data that we would collect from each transaction was such that we could make sure that that money goes back to the community or the county in which the burden transpired, trying to make sure that the background and the details on all that was put into place, took a lot of thought and a lot of time, and that's certainly been implemented in this bill.
Okay, and one last question, Mr. Chair. As far as legitimate transfers, I know we're trying to separate the illegal transfers. So what about legitimate transfers if I wanted to send something internationally. So would it affect those legitimate transfers as well?
Yes, sir, it would. If you are sending cash to another country from this state internationally, it would have a 4% on a cash transfer. If you're a tax-paying citizen, you'll be able to keep up with that receipt and put it on your income taxes. In the state of Oklahoma, from what I'm hearing, there's just not that many transactions that actually happen. And I did hear that Tennessee, the state of Tennessee, I talked to a colleague or a state representative there just the other day last week, and theirs failed, but they had a percentage on credit card transactions, which I know I'd heard from some of you that why don't we just put it on credit card transactions as well? That's what they were doing there in that bill, and that's one of the bills that did not make it. So this would not affect credit cards.
All right, Representative Witt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have several questions, if you would bear with me. But you mentioned Oklahoma. Did they pass their legislation?
They've had that legislation for years, so it's been in place for a long time.
2007, actually, I think.
So it was passed in 2007.
I think it was 7.
Okay.
Yeah.
We passed a bill here recently out of the House allowing individuals to take their money directly from their state paychecks and pay loans. You remember that bill coming through?
Tell me.
Anyway, I don't remember. I failed to remember the number, but it was Representative Hassel's bill that we had. And do you remember the percentage of state employees that does not have a banking relationship?
It's Hassel's bill. Okay.
That's correct.
Yeah, that's right. They went in and wanted to make sure that we were able to help people pay
with
for
low credit or was unbankable.
No, I do not remember the number of people that did not have a.
So, I was told it was 18%. Okay, so this is 18% of our state employees, that do not have a banking relationship, that depend on these
PayPal or Venmo
or
Cash
if
App.
we're wiring money out of the country, they would be responsible for the 4% fee. Is that correct?
They would be responsible if they're sending cash without a Cash App,
Okay.
without PayPal, without Venmo, without any Cash App.
But
They
if
were
I went
sending
to
cash.
but if I did go to one of these services and want to send money I would be charged the 4%.
If you were sending
Correct.
money out internationally,
As a state
Cash.
employee, I would be taxed basically 4%.
you'd have a 4% fee, and then you're able to put that on your income taxes.
So explain to me, would I need to keep that receipt for the end of the year?
You need that for your taxes,
Taxes.
just like you
So
do
if
any
I
of
do
your other
that
receipts.
once a month, or I'd have to keep those 12 receipts for someone that's really unbankable, that doesn't have a checking account, I would physically have to keep the 12, all the receipts that I've used.
That
for
would
that.
be a burden that
that's
the
a tax.
person, we
that's
call it a
tax.
fee. You call it a tariff if you want.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I'll call it a tax because it seems what it is to me. And I don't know if why we're settling at 4%, why wouldn't you do it to 10% if you're trying to curtail this?
Well, you can certainly make an amendment.
Yeah, well, it won't be
Representative
me. Are you familiar with the term MSB?
Uh,
MSB is money
service.
servicing business, and that's what all of these people have. So like your convenience stores or these other places that has the that sends the wire transfers out. Okay,
Yes, sir.
they're registered MSBs. As a banker, we have several MSBs that we personally bank, and it's quite a lot of paperwork and criteria to get them approved for this. And we've often thought of them as our first line of defense in many of these, suspicious activities. We have to file what's called a SAR, which is a suspicious activity report. Credit unions, banks, MSBs have to file those when there's suspicious activities that come in, right? When we think there may be drug money or illicit cash that comes in a certain amount, we have to file these SARs with the federal government. Our bank filed 3 last year. Do you know what MSB's filed? The people out on the streets that are sending these? I think it was about 20,000 in the state of Alabama. So it sounds to me like they're doing a really good job on the front end of catching these and turning it over to the authorities. You said it does sunset in 3 years, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and that would be, I mean, that would certainly be helpful on that. For businesses that are conducting, business abroad, like purchase parts, things of that, how will that tax affect them?
It will not affect them. This fee does not affect businesses. This was vetted. We sent this bill out back in December to all the banking associations, to the Business Council of Alabama, to our whole group, to let them vet it and give us their feedback. And most of all that feedback, we've tried to make sure it was we did make sure it was business friendly, and we took that feedback and then put it in the bill.
Yeah, okay. So again, they will need to pay the tax up front.
Well, the individuals,
They would need to pay
the individuals would pay the fee, and that would, if they are a tax-paying citizen, they would be required to keep up with the receipts, just like you do any other of your taxes, and they would be able to get a tax credit at the end of the year. We have a lot. These migrant has put these community burdens on these communities. In my community, in Baldwin County, in Fairhope, I may have 4% of non-English speaking students in a classroom. I go out to get out in the county, more in the county part of my district. We may have 20 to 30% of our students. And there are people that were in this migrant study, probably in this, your colleagues, that may have twice that, non-English speaking students. The number of teachers per ratio on that is 1 to 100. So 1 teacher to 100 of these students, they're trying to teach them English, and what they're doing is taking these older students down and trying to teach English to these younger. This is half of this percent. I know we heard from the sheriffs, but half of this goes to help those situations and help our hospitals where we're seeing the issue. It's maybe not perfect, but it is a way to help our communities. It's a method that we can actually put in place to help. And some of our communities are desperate.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I don't have it.
All right. Any questions, Representative Paramore?
Yeah. Representative Fidler, you and I have had many conversations about this piece of legislation. I think you know where I stand. How will this, I got 2 things. How would this affect farm hands? I know there's a lot of migrant workers that are in the fields that are doing a lot of work that our own citizens do not want to do, and they're there, and it's irrelevant how they're getting paid, whether it's cash or they're getting a check or whatever. But how is this going to affect them wiring money back home to their families?
If they're not paying taxes in the state, it would be.
So it's going to put a burden on migrant workers in this state.
4%. It would be on illegal or legal.
How does Alpha feel about this bill?
They're neutral.
I bet they are.
What they've told me. I don't know. Have they talked to you about something different?
Well, no, not necessarily. But yes, there are some in my district that have some concerns. There are concerns that, okay, migrant workers are going to pick up and they're going to go other places. So if they can't get the workers in their fields or to do the jobs that they need to do, I know there's some questions, and I think a lot of this is stirring from chicken plants and things of that nature in this state where workers are. But I'll stop there on that issue. The other is Western unions. How is this going to affect Western unions in our stores and things of that nature? Is this going to hurt them? Because that's a lot of cash transactions, aren't they?
That anything that has a cash transaction that's not with a bank, it would have a 4% fee.
You and I have talked about, we personally send money to my sister in Africa. She's a missionary. I'm going to have to pay that 4%. If I use cash.
If you use cash.
No matter how I do it, I'm probably going to have to pay it because it's going out of the country, and then I'm going to have to file it on my taxes to get it back. But I know my grandmother used to send money constantly to Africa to her daughter and to my sister on the mission field. And she would go to the local grocery store and she would get a Western Union wire and she would send that money to them. So I still have concerns about that. You know, one of my concerns is if it's cash or if it's any other method, I think they all got to be lumped together. So thank you.
All right, thanks. Any other questions? Representative Inslee?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Representative Fidler, I know we've had a few conversations. I appreciate the transparency. You know, one of the things we've discussed is that there are a lot of really good initiatives that this would fund. The question I have is, have there been conversations about funding this through the general fund or through the ETF instead of through an additional tax?
The ETF, we have heard that there are going to be some funds coming down to help with some of those. Whether or not that goes through the, you know, the funding mechanism and gets approval, I'm not sure. But the governor did put money to help with some of these issues. Would it be enough like this? No, it's not enough to answer all those, to be able to really fund the needs. But it helps.
Sure, and let me just go on the record saying this with Mr. Hillman and Sheriff Mack. You know, I want to echo, you know, I appreciate them tremendously and think that we should be funding them even more than we are. I just wish that we were doing it in a different way, you know, potentially through the general fund instead of this kind of fee or tax. One other question I have on the anti-laundering part of it, how would a tax or a fee, I know there's a different in semantics, how would that stop any laundering? If we say this goes through, how would that prevent someone from actually laundering the money?
Okay, ask me that. I mean, the first part of that, how
So
would
one
that-
argument that was made for the fee was that it would prevent laundering. How would that prevent it from happening?
You know, I'm not sure it would. And that might be another question for the Securities Commission, if it would actually, if we'd be able to catch more or not. I can't answer that. But I can tell you that Ways and Means General Fund is basically flat, and we're not able to get any unless we come up with another revenue stream. You know, that right now, of course, you know, is flat. It's our education trust fund that has a little bit more money in it that we're able to offer these tax credits, you know, like we are this year. But Ways and Means, of course, is flat, you know, our revenue streams. That's why the sheriff's not able to get money out of the general fund.
Thank you.
All right. All right. I got a few comments, and Bo, we'll make sure we get you we can ask all the questions or you answer all of them. I hope you get all good notes. And I first want to say, Representative Fidler, you know, you and I have talked several times over the last 3 weeks. Several is probably an understatement, and I want to tell you thank you, you know, for that, because a lot of people ask a lot of times why legislation may not have passed and/or why was it misunderstood. It's because it's a lack of communication. So no matter if you're for or against this piece of legislation, you've done a yeoman's job of making sure to communicate with us on this committee consistently about that. So I really, you're to be complimented for the work you've done on that. And I don't think I'm going to say anything here that you and I hadn't already spoken about. My big concern with this is and this may not be a popular statement to some people, but do we have issues in this country and in this state with illegal immigration and what's happened in recent years? We do. But at the same time, I feel like, you know, every individual Haitian or every individual Hispanic that we walk by on the streets in the state of Alabama, they're not here illegally. A lot of them are here paying taxes. Some aren't. Some are here doing what they should be and been here many years providing for their family. They're working. They're doing a lot of jobs that we don't want to do. I see that each and every day now in the field that I'm with, whether it's farm hands, whether it's working in construction. They provide a valuable asset to our economy and our state. And are there issues we need to address? Absolutely. But my number one concern I have with this piece of legislation is we have a problem. I think the sheriffs, we heard that from both that spoke, we have an issue. How does this legislation eliminate the issue? It does nothing but tax the issue, fund the issue, It doesn't help clean up or rid the state of the issue of money laundering to the cartel. It does none of that. You know, you and I have talked about that. And the $10 million, was that based off the numbers coming out of Oklahoma, or were those numbers coming from the Securities Commission of the projected revenue?
And I'm gonna let Bo talk about that because it was that, but the Oklahoma numbers were anywhere from 10 to 15.
Yeah, and you remember Oklahoma has, I think, legalized marijuana now. I think they have a lot more dynamics that led to that. And if you go back and look close to that 2007 legislation, they also went back and repealed the tax credit section of it because nobody was doing it. It just wasn't worth it to keep up with the receipts. So that's been repealed off that. So that would be 10 million. My quick math tells me, and you know, here's the banker and the CPA, and I sell concrete. That's 250 million cash dollars. We're saying this, leaving cash international wire transfers from our state. We're saying at least 250 million. So I'd be interested to see where those numbers come from. I do know those phone banks, and I appreciate you sharing that number, the picture that Randy shared today. 4 of those 5 phones are regulated through the Securities Commission with that. It looks bootleg as it can be from that picture, and I don't claim to know how it works, but I know there's a process there with that. So, you know, that's really where I am on this, just for me. And again, it's just I know what you're trying to do, and I would ask, and here's where we are, and I agree with Representative Ensler. We understand, or at least I do, I don't speak for everybody, so I guess it'd be me and Representative Ensler at this point. We understand the funding challenges around the sheriffs. There's a legislation that's been passed. I understand what it's taken away. I understand because we sit on, Representative Witt and I sit on general fund as well too. We see, and Representative Underwood, we see the money, that the $5 million that still goes towards the Sheriff's Association now to help try to offset some of that. I wish people could have a chance to vote on gaming. That was a big part of the legislation that was in there to help fund our sheriffs. Things like that, net new revenue, is I think ways we got to fund our sheriffs and fund other things in this state, and it's not taxing a service or a fee, and we're just striking it across the board saying a one size fits all. Because some people are doing this illegally, but a lot of them aren't. You know, we're going to tell them, sorry, you're doing it the right way, but we need you to do just a little bit more to get your money back at the end of the year. So that's my statements. I mean, I don't know, Bo, if you want to come up here now and let's ask these questions, if that's okay with that.
Absolutely. I'm Bo Brown. I'm with the Alabama Securities Commission. We were asked to be involved to provide technical assistance to the money transmission section of the bill. We regulate both money transmitters and the securities industry in the state of Alabama. We look out for the markets, for industry, and for the people using those markets. As to, Representative, your questions, and let me know if I miss any of them, but I believe you were asking about illicit transfers. Yes, ways around this would be the cards that you can load money onto that you can get at a grocery store or Walmart or wherever. Also, USDT is an option, Tether, which is a stablecoin cryptocurrency. Issues related to that, though, and why the cash transfers at a Western Union or other storefront like that would be more viable is, you know, it's going to be a lot of cards to load, and USDT is going to have a higher fee base on that. You also have to have access to internet and be able to set up wallets, that sort of thing. Representative Shaw, I'm sure, can give us a tutorial about all of that. So generally coming back to cash and doing that transfer is what's going to be the easiest, quickest, and most effective for most people that are trying to just transfer some form of funds to somewhere else. The exceptions, Representative, are in Section 2. It lists banks, credit cards, payment processors, anybody that's exempt under the money transmission sections. So basically what's going on, so if a business is wanting to transfer funds to another country, and we've talked to some businesses that wanted to do that, they're going to be transferring that most of the time from a bank account or from some account tied to a bank account to the transfer service that's going to be doing that. So we met with a number of different industry representatives. We've spoken, well, not to name names, but a number of different names, and we've taken those into account. What we did, we are very good on the money transmission side. I want to say that we are very, very proficient when it comes to the money transmission side. When it gets to the part about exemptions, we went to Oklahoma because the way the process works, we're not as familiar with versus what the process is, if that makes sense. So that's why we pulled from Oklahoma, because it was a known, and we would ask, are you paying in? And we were told by the entities that weren't the focus of this, that they weren't paying in. We've heard that some of that language is archaic. I'm not arguing that. We were just going with what we knew was working based on what we understood the point of the bill was. As to the numbers, the $10 million, yes, that was a mixture of Oklahoma and the numbers that we have. So right now in Alabama, we don't care how you register with us. We want you to be able to register in whatever way it's easiest for you to register with. We're, like I said, we are very focused on making sure industry has what they need and that they can come in Alabama and do business while being regulated to making sure that the customers are protected. So you can mail in an application to us. You can do it online. A number of the companies go through a system called NMLS, and please don't ask me what that acronym stands for, but they can do that online. And some of them voluntarily report the number of international transfers that they have and the amounts that are transferred. We had, I believe, $180 million worth of international transfers in 2024, I believe. So don't hold me to that. I'm going off memory. And that's just the voluntary. Now, pulling back from that and what makes it cloudy for us is we don't know how many of those originated from a bank or went in with a credit card or that sort of thing. So we can see the number. We also know that we've got an idea of who's not reporting. But we look to Oklahoma. Now, one difference about Oklahoma is they don't distinguish between international and domestic transfers. They're hitting a percentage on all of those. We would be doing that on international. So we're having to sort of pull from a number of different sources to determine what that amount is. But that's how we came up with that approximation.
All right, so let me ask you this then. So would it be safe to say that, let's just say if it was $250 million was the base on that, would it be safe to say that the $180 million and that $250 million that's voluntarily being reported is pretty much people doing it the right way?
Oh, yes, sir. Yeah, there's no.
So that would already distill it down from $250 million down to just the net sum of that of what, $70 million that may be questionable. If we're using it, if you take the $180 million off the $250 million that's self-reporting, that only leaves $70 million outside that's not being self-reported. That could be questionable.
I wouldn't even call it questionable. It's just they aren't entering that into the,
Okay.
They don't have to, is the point. So some companies, the
Yeah.
larger companies are doing that, but I wouldn't say that the companies that aren't are doing anything questionable. It's just they're not entering it.
I guess from this purpose, I guess from a laundering perspective and all, they still may be doing it, but if they're voluntarily reporting it, I have a hard time thinking sometimes they may, or that could be the cover. I mean, because I'm just trying to figure out the numbers on it, what's truly the impact. Now, walk me through your investigation division, because y'all have that today.
Sure, and can I actually go back on
Yeah.
the laundering side and say, I want to be clear. The companies that aren't reporting it to NMLS, we're not saying that there's any laundering. That the companies are registered with us, so they're doing what they're supposed to be doing properly. Where they're subject to audits, they're subject to re-registering every year. The laundering would come in from somebody trying to get around the safe sort of the practices they've got. So even if they're not registering, I don't want there to be some indicia of bad on that company by not reporting it to NMLS.
Mike and others in here, please note that was not saying anything about that for the
No, I just want to be clear that
I'm just saying that for that. Neither one of us were.
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Because I think the federal mandate is any cash international transfer over $3,000, right, has to be automatically reported.
Yes, sir. Yes,
So I just wanted y'all to know that is the cap set at the federal level is $3,000.
Right.
So you have a lot underneath that. So a lot is getting reported, more so than I didn't realize that until you just said it. That's why I wanted to dig into that a little bit deeper.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, sir.
All right.
As to the investigation, I do need to be a little bit careful. We've got confidentiality requirements that are statutory, but that these issues were raised to us. We looked at them based on the names that are on there. They are registered and the stores are designated, but there are additional steps that we intend to take, and we can talk offline.
All right,
That's okay.
absolutely. All right, any other questions for the Securities Commission? All right, thank you. All right, any more questions for Representative Fidler on this topic? All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Hey,
All right,
can I say one thing?
Yeah, go ahead real quick.
I just want to say that, I asked to carry this bill, with the immigration study group, and there were, about 6 or 7 of us that thought this is a cool bill. So I appreciate your time and look forward to having, discussions
All
about
right,
it.
thank you. All right, we're adjourned.